Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's very special Modern Sales Pros event. We're diving deep and talking all things about this mysterious black box in your sales process. Today's session is sponsored by the team at Proposify, and we're joined by Daniel Hebert from Proposify. Welcome, Daniel.
Hey, Rich.
We're excited to have you here. And Daniel, we have a tradition on MSP for all of our first-time speakers and first-time panelists. We always love to learn a little bit more about you. You're gonna get to showcase your big, amazing set of content that we have here and share all the perspective you have on building great proposals. But Daniel, before we get into that, have you developed any new skills or hobbies or picked up anything or honed anything since the start of the pandemic?
That's a good question, Rich. Working from home has allowed me to cook a lot more, which has been my hobby through COVID. It's I used to cook a couple times a week, and now I get to cook almost every night because I don't have to commute back and forth. And I've really honed in my creative cooking skills.
Oh, excellent. And Daniel, what's the go-to specialty that you've refined since the start?
That's too difficult of a question.
Putting you on the spot. We want the recipe, Daniel.
I really like making Caribbean food and Asian food.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
That's some good flavors too, especially when you're dealing with the cold winter. I imagine some of the jerk spices really warm you up.
Absolutely.
That's great. And for those of you who couldn't place it, Daniel is in Canada and you're in Halifax?
Halifax, yep.
All right, I got it right. one of the many amazing folks at Proposify, and we'll give everybody here just another 30 seconds to get in and get settled. Daniel, I'm going to ask you one more question about being Canadian here before we jump in. What's the go-to order at Tim Hortons for you?
Oh, I'm pretty simple. It's like a dark roast coffee with 2 milks, 1 sugar.
All right, that's good.
Yeah.
That's the for those following along at home, the New Englanders on the call. That's kind of the Dunkin' Donuts of Canada. I think it's held in similar regard. What I've heard.
Yeah, it sure is.
All right, folks. Well, we're gonna actually jump into it here. And as I said, we're really excited about today's session. It is sponsored by the team at Proposify. But before we jump into that, today's session is actually hosted by the team at Modern Sales Pros. And Daniel, if you advance the slide one. For those of you who don't know, Modern Sales Pros is the world's largest community for revenue leaders. So those are individuals that are in sales management roles, sales and revenue operations, and the related supporting disciplines. Our mission is to create an environment for our 20,000 and growing community members to answer the most difficult questions they'd face on their own. We do that through bringing on expert panelists like Daniel here. We have a very robust online forum. And once we're all safe and able to do it, we will resume our wonderful in-person events so we can all share a coffee or a cocktail together and talk about these fun topics and how great it is to be next to another human being. For those of you who are not members joining us today, you will be invited to join shortly there afterwards. Everything we do is free for our members, and I'd certainly encourage you to check it out for more programming like what we have here today with Daniel. And as I had mentioned at the outset, today's session is sponsored by the team at Proposify. What we're talking about today wouldn't be possible without them. I'm going to hand it over to Daniel Hebert to say a few words about Proposify. Oh, nope, I went out of order. There is one more slide for us, Daniel. Also, sorry, Hannah, I know I missed this one. We are also at Modern Sales Pros hosting our first summit of the year. For those of you who are interested in learning about all things sales excellence, how to align your sales team with your marketing team, how to build a technical sales process, how to grow and scale your pipe gen activities, do join us next month at our MSP University 3-day summit. Amazing sessions. We've got some of the heaviest hitters in the industry speaking. Jeremy Donovan will be joining us. KD from Patient Pop will be joining us, and so many more. Certainly do check that out. It's going to be a fun time. And now, sorry for the false start there, I'll hand it off to Daniel Hebert to say a few words about Proposify. Daniel?
Hey everyone, I'm Daniel Hebert. I'm the VP of Sales at Proposify. We help sales leaders gain control and visibility over the closing phase of their sales process, while maximizing revenue and minimizing risk in their closing stages. And we do this through proposals, contracts, agreements, quotes, whatever you name your documents. My background comes from, I've been in tech startups, early stage tech startups, my entire career. I've held a number of go-to-market roles in both marketing and sales. I've been at Proposify for the last couple of years, heading up the sales team. Before that, I was at Level Jump. I was one of the early hires there, and I was doing a little bit of everything. And I've worked in sales enablement as well at past companies.
That's awesome, Daniel, and we're excited to have you here. And we love that background as well, right? Level Jump, great modern sales pro sponsor, and also having a few different roles at Proposify really puts you uniquely positioned to have our conversation here today. And before we jump into it, just two housekeeping notes. Please do use the Q&A panel. That's going to help Daniel and I best answer your questions. And also today's session will be recorded. So for those of you, that's usually the first question that gets asked here, that the session will be recorded. So with that, Daniel, you ready to hop in and start chatting here?
I am.
I love it. Well, I think, why is this, like, what are we talking about here today? Like, why is the proposal process such a black box in the sales process?
So one of the things that we've noticed is a lot of sales leaders and RevOps leaders will invest in the top of the funnel, right? We have these large BDR teams. We invest in Zoom info, outreach. We have our CRM, all of that stuff. And as you go down the funnel, did I cut out there?
Yeah, you froze for a teeny bit there. Sorry about that.
My apologies. So I'm trying to see if I can X out a couple things, I guess.
No.
So I don't know where I left off, but we invest a ton in the top of the funnel, like in leads and Zoom info and data and all that stuff, because we need more leads and we need more opportunities. But as time goes on, and as your deal progresses, there's less and less investment in what's like in closing the deal. And what we found is that a lot of RevOps focus on that top of the funnel, but when it comes to the proposal to close, which is arguably like the most important stage of the deal, you're getting towards the finish line, you've invested so much so far. A lot of RevOps professionals will just not pay attention to that stage. They're like, yeah, we're fine at that point. Like we already got them. But when you look at the data, and like we have millions of proposals that are sent through Proposify, and I'll talk about some of the data and the trends that we see. That's not the case of what we see. Like there are strategic advantages that you can develop at your proposal stage that help you close more deals. But oftentimes you just don't even know that it's happening.
No, it seems like it's such an interesting concept to talk about, right? Because you mentioned you've got all of these great tools, and that space is growing, right? That space in the pre-demo, and even the demo stage now, right? With Reprise and Demo Stack and Demo Desk and so many others, starting to nibble its way forward here. But this black box of proposals, for me, I was like, I've never even thought about this space. So really excited to have you sharing this here. And this is really interesting. So how can we make proposals better, right? How can we help that be a more effective tool that we've got in our selling arsenal, just like we've got, outreach helping us write better, more tailored email sequences?
Yeah, that's a great question. One of the things that we notice is that, and this is like one of the places in the sales process that gets the least amount of innovation, right? And one of the things that we notice is that a lot of sales teams are still using technology that's 30 years old at this stage. And when you think about it in that way, like there's very little in your sales process that you do besides your proposals and your contracts that you are using that type of technology. Like nobody is using a 30-year-old phone right? The PDF came out in 1993. Same time as Aladdin came out on VHS. I know that because one of my reps used that in one of his talk tracks
Wow.
once, right? So it's when you think about that and you think about how people buy in general these days and what you're used to, people are really, they're used to websites, they're used to apps, they're used to Netflix and Amazon of like right now. And there's a ton of technology out there that can help you do that. But oftentimes you don't think about it when it comes to your paperwork process. You're like, that's that's a toilet paper problem. It's there. It has to happen, but it can't. It can't necessarily be any better.
Right. Well, and I think I want to highlight this point for folks that Daniel's making here. If we think about, and the pandemic's only accelerated some of this, but this is what we've referenced. Brian Halligan talks about the consumerization of the buying experience. Even if we look at our own personal lives in the consumer world, Daniel, if you're familiar with like Vroom or Beepy, you're buying cars online now, sight unseen. A couple of years ago, it was just mattresses, which is still crazy to me. But there's people buying cars, and there's a huge demand for that. And it's funny because I love this analogy of like everything we do is really easy, and then I get proposals, and it's like, what is this? Like this looks like my SAT work from like the 2000s kind of thing.
The other thing that I was thinking about this as I was prepping for this masterclass, there tends to be a lot of friction between sales and marketing in general, like at a lot of companies, right? It's a big topic, but there's stuff that marketing can help with in the sales cycle that I don't think as sales professionals that we allow them to really shine and help us out. And your documents is one of those things, right? And I was thinking this through. If like no sales leader would object to, um, if you went on your website and you had only black and white text paragraphs of like long form like jargon, you would not get leads, right? People would like bounce right away. And there's nobody in sales that would argue that your website is incredibly important. It needs to communicate your value. It needs to communicate the pain you solve. It needs to look great. It needs to stand out. But when you talk to sales leaders about, okay, like what are you doing for your proposals? It's like, cool, I have this Excel table with a price in there and T's and C's. And it's like, okay, but the reality is you're probably selling to a buyer committee. You've probably talked to some of the people on the buyer committee,
Yeah.
and you're sending this proposal, which is really the same as your website, in that case, just deeper in the funnel, to people that have never seen it. And if you were to send a website that's black and white paragraph text, people will be like, what is this?
It would feel very, very strange unless it was done completely ironically and self-referentially, in which case kudos to you for bringing humor into
That bold.
sales. But like I think for us mere mortals, this is very true. And
Yep.
Daniel, one of the questions that, and we've seen this in Modern Sales Pros, it came in during registration. I know that the audience is diverse as well. Does this matter for like really low average sale price deals, or how does this change if that sales price kind of is on the smaller end?
That's a good question. What we've seen is that it doesn't necessarily matter what your ACV is. If you have a good process and you're leveraging templates, where what we found when we were interviewing or surveying a number of salespeople is that 82% of proposals are created from a template. So if you're leveraging that type of workflow, you can get something that's pretty compelling and beautiful and interactive out to your audience, regardless of the deal size. Like we have customers that range from like 7-figure deals, and we have some that are sending out $100 deals. They're just doing like 100 of them a week.
Jeez.
Yeah.
No, and I think that that's something too. It almost seems like it would counterintuitively matter more for the small deal because you have more of a consumer, you have more of a transactional model, right?
Yeah, and like again, it comes back to like what are people used to when they're buying stuff? They're used to website, they're used to apps. And then if you're selling that low value ACV, you're probably in a commoditized industry.
Yeah.
Right? That's usually what we see is like we have all sorts of customers, some that are hot tub customers and some that are software companies and everything in between. But a lot of those like hot tub companies or like ones that sell parts or manufacturers or wholesalers, their ACV might be smaller, but they're also competing, like their competition is massive because there's in such a commoditized industry. And if you have the ability to stand out throughout your sales process, and in their case, the only differentiator is really how they sell. If you have the ability to stand out, that can be the difference between you winning and losing deals.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point here. And as the buying committee increases, especially for folks in the MSP audience in the venture-backed SaaS world, you actually had an interesting story you mentioned in prep about how I'd actually like you to talk that through a little bit, where it was a big proposal and the sales rep was like, "No, it's fine. Like I've talked to everybody." What happened with that deal?
Yeah, there's a prospect that we're working with, and that came from them, um, and like we challenged them on their proposals. Like, but what part of what we do is like we'll do a bit of a proposal audit as we're going through and showing our functionality and stuff. But they gave us their proposal, and right away they gave us two. One was 20 pages and one was 117 pages. So we are like, okay, it's pretty inconsistent how you're closing deals, because that's two like massively different proposals. So they were like, yeah, you're right. And then we looked at it, and then what they told us is that as time went on, they would basically, their competitors would start winning more deals. So instead of really looking at, okay, are we delivering the right thing, they started just adding everything that they could sell in their proposal, because then they were like, well, if we give them everything, then they can see everything that we can do, and that way we might be able to upsell a couple extra products and whatever. So when we look at that, it was like, okay, wow. But their competitors were giving like the right information in
Right.
6 to 10 pages, and they started losing deals. And when you have two proposals on your desk and solutions look fairly similar, are you going to spend the time reading the 117 page one or the 10 page one?
No, definitely. I don't know about folks on the line here, but yeah, 117 pages, that's a book. That's not
Yeah.
that's a short story, let's say, or a long story here. Well, and I think that this is, and Dan, I don't remember if it was you mentioned this during the prep or if we had talked about it prior, but the proposal really is the final deliverable of everything that had happened before it. So I could understand that a well-intentioned organization would say, well, I've talked to Dan about everything, and here's everything that we possibly do, but what is the real purpose of a proposal with this? Like, if you could give folks, just normalize this a little bit on a first principle.
So if you think about a proposal in this way, it's really the summary of your discovery, right? If you think really about it, like if you're using Medic or Sandler Submarine or any other qualification or discovery framework, it's a summary of your discovery at the end of the day. So if you think about it in this way, if you're giving everything to the prospect, like all the solutions, it means that you didn't do a very good discovery. You didn't show your active listening skills. You didn't show that you understand their problems, and you didn't show that you can solve those problems for them. So that's really what you're looking for in a good proposal. That's the type of content that you want to add into it.
And not everything, right? Not everything.
Not everything. It's like you want to show that you actually listen, you understand them, you understand their problems, and the solution that you're putting in front of them is the best one to solve that problem that you've uncovered.
I think that's a great point, Dan. Let's chat a little bit more about our sort of second topic area here, and it's when we think about closing and when we think about making sure that we have our reps set up for success, whether a sales leader or as an operations leader, what are some of the things that are essential to making sure that our reps can close, and how does that fold into some of the research that you've done
So
here?
what we found in this key piece, so like one of the things that I want from my sales team is I want to run a pretty consistent process, right? And I think a lot of us that, especially in SaaS, we're trying to grow, we're trying to scale. We need something that's repeatable, that 80% of the reps are going to do 80% of the times, and it's something that we can replicate and hire people to do. You want that same type of rigor and consistency in your closing process, and that's what we found. Like when we analyze all of these millions of proposals, those are the things that help close more deals and help scale you up. Is the first thing is the visibility on what's going on, what's being sent, how people are reacting to it. All the insights that are coming from that can really help you time your follow-ups properly. You know, when is the right time to follow up, how often should you follow up, etc. And then gaining control over the process, because we've seen this like a lot of times. Like a lot of sales leaders that I talk to, you know, they always have a couple reps that go rogue, right? We've all been there. We've all had them on our team. They
that,
just
that,
kind
that
of do
happens.
something that's, you know, wasn't necessarily approved. And sometimes it works and it's fine, it's great. But sometimes, you know, your CS teams come back to you and they're like, okay, we can't do this. Or your finance team is like, we didn't approve this discount. The best example that I have there was we were working with a customer, and before they were a customer of ours, one of their reps had an outdated template for their proposal,
Oh,
and um, they ended up selling the like a product that was discontinued. And the reason was discontinued is that internally they had changed service providers, and the cost of servicing that deal had 5x. So they ended up closing the deal, and they were like, I won a $300,000 contract. And he was like, yeah, like, and nobody celebrated and was like, okay, what's going on? This is a big deal. It's like, okay, it's going to cost us $500,000 to service this deal because we changed our service provider and we're no longer selling this. So they were negative 200K profit on that deal because of a mistake on an outdated proposal.
well, I think that's this. There's a lot here, and Dan, I want to ask a question. I know folks are maybe thinking about. I know you've done the research on. Where's the most common place that I start with a proposal?
In terms of like what to add to it?
When I'm an AE and I'm making
Yeah.
I've got a proposal to send to you, Dan. We're ready to be close. Where do I usually go to get that information? Usually, what do I do without a tool like Proposify, right?
Totally. So I'm gonna go here.
So I know we're jumping around a little bit.
This one, that's the one I'm looking for. So it's really 11 pages, 7 sections. That's what it comes down to. So the 7 sections that you need in your proposal, and this is probably something that you already have. So it's usually something that you can grab, and like I said, it's usually some sort of summary of your discovery. So if you've done your discovery well, you should be able to put a proposal together pretty quickly. So the 7 sections, just popping them up here, are your cover page. So if you really want to stand out, have a cover page that looks great. Adding images to your proposals, by the way, increases your close rate by 26%. That's something that we found through our data. So a lot of proposals that we see when we first see them are just black and white text and paragraphs. So adding images just immediately makes you stand out, and it uses white space a lot better. So that's number one. Number two is an executive summary. So the executive summary is typically it's not explaining what's in your proposal. It's explaining what you've uncovered and your solution that you're putting in place, very high level. That's typically the first thing that, besides your kind of your pricing section, that's usually the other place that a lot of people will look. After that, you have your approach, your solution. So usually you have some, even like you use your copy that you have on your website. You might have a sales deck that you can steal from for that. A little bit about us or the team that's going to be attached to the deal. And then deliverables. So what are you actually getting by buying the solution? Your pricing, which there's specific language that you should have for your pricing. And then actually adding your T's and C's, your terms and conditions, to your proposal, which most people don't. They separate that process.
Interesting. This is a very good overview here. And question, actually, a live question coming in here. What recommendations? So we've got up on the slide here, images in, proposals with images close at a higher rate. What would you recommend as best practices for some of those images? Are we just stock photography with happy people? What have you seen be successful there?
So the thing to think about there is, like, you don't have to overthink it. It's really about branding your document, making it look professional, making it look like it's standing out. And oftentimes, if you go to your website or you look at your decks, there are some images, whether they're stock photography, your own photography. If your software, they might be like screenshots, like that kind of stuff. It's more about the design, the look and feel of the proposal than the specific images that you put in there.
I think that's interesting. You can think about this too from the website perspective. I think that's a great idea there, Dan. Another question coming in, and this is a good one. Terms and conditions.
Yep.
How do you actually fold that in without the proposal turning into a big scary document filled with legalese?
Yep. There's a couple ways to do it. If your terms and conditions aren't too long, tack them at the end and add a signature to your proposal. Actually adding your signature to your proposal when you send the proposal for the first time increases your close rate by like 480%. It's like ridiculous. So a lot of people separate.
Repeat that one more time for our audience here. I don't want that to get lost, because I think Dan just said something that was super impactful for us.
465%. Sorry, I exaggerated a little bit. 465%. If you add your signature and their signature to the proposal. That's why a lot of people are starting to combine their T's and C's and their proposals together. Because it's like our CEO had this. I'll share this example. He had this problem. Somebody reached out to them outbound. He was ready to go. And he was like, the AE was like, okay, cool. Mary from accounting is going to send you a DocuSign with our T's and C's. I was like, okay. Days went by, no DocuSign. Our CEO reached back out and was like, okay, like I haven't even seen a proposal, like all that stuff. If you speed that up and you combine that process, you'll actually close your deals a lot faster and you'll get a higher win rate, because when people review your proposal and the buyer committee reviews your proposal, that's when they are like most excited about your solution, not when they're going through the legalese and stuff after all of that stuff. So you want to hit them with a signature when they are most excited.
Right. That's a crazy point there on the close rate. A lot more questions coming in. This is great, folks. Please do keep using the question and answer panel. This is really helpful for Dan and I. In terms of, actually, I want to talk about labels here. This is a question from Susan, and it's a phenomenal question. How do you actually frame up pricing in the proposal? Fees, investment, pricing, and I know it's going to depend on a lot of different factors, but what language have you seen be successful in terms of framing up the cost?
So investment has been the most used on winning proposals. So that's what I would recommend. Pricing is not used a lot. Cost is not used a lot. Fees is kind of in the middle, but investment is the one that's used the most. I want to go back because I half answered
Yeah.
the question about the T's and C's, because I got
Yeah, no,
super excited about the e-signatures.
it's a great data point, and we can hit on the T's and C's point again, because I think we're all still like, whoa, 465%. Like, yeah, let's just start putting the T's and C's in there. But yeah, please, Dan.
Yeah.
Continue.
So the way we've seen it done really well is if you have abbreviated T's and C's, add that to the proposal, because you don't really want your proposal to be much more than 11 pages. So if you have 7 sections, 6 of them being content, the 7th one being T's and C's and signatures, that allows room for about 4 pages at the end. But if you have an abbreviated version, you can also send for the full T's and C's, go to the website. I know a lot of software companies have their full T's and C's on the website. So, and like, that's how we've done it. That's how we've seen a lot of our customers do it to minimize the amount of pages. It's like, here are the things that are important for this deal, and click here to get the full T's and C's.
Yeah, in my past life, that's how we did it, right? The ones that we knew based on vertical that you would want to probably negotiate on, those are the ones that we would be willing to negotiate on as well. We would put that in our proposals, and then everything that was like non-negotiable, this is it, take it or leave it, lived on the website.
Yeah.
Couple more questions coming in. And this is actually a question that came in both on registration and here live. Presenting proposals or developing proposals for different types of potential customers.
Mm-hmm.
So this person has sort of two personality types they're working with, right? One that's like numbers, details, facts. The other that's a little bit more figures and images. How do you recommend folks reconciling that when they've got maybe two different buyer personas?
I'm not sure I would separate it in that way. Like, in different types of customers, I would say, like, if you're selling into different verticals, if you're selling different deal size, so maybe have a SMB team, a commercial team, an enterprise team. That's kind of how you're most likely going to look at your proposals. The only, like, the majority of the times there's going to be a buyer committee if you're selling anything that's above a few $1,000s. There's usually a couple people that need to look at it, and everybody reacts differently to the proposal. At the end of the day, it doesn't necessarily matter if you're numbers driven. People appreciate good design, right? You don't like using clunky software for a reason. You don't like going to a clunky website, right? So, and at the end of the day, it doesn't necessarily matter if it's numbers driven or image driven. People appreciate good design, so you can make numbers look good.
Yeah, I think that's a great point for those who may remember or be a little bit more technical in the audience. It's a reason why we don't just use command line for everything, even though it's really efficient. It's really, really bad user experience. No, this is great. So a couple more questions. I actually want to take this one that came in from registration, because I think it's interesting. Any research or best practices in terms of how to present the proposal? Should it be done live first, followed up with email? Should it be in presentation mode like what we're doing here, and then maybe followed up with, like, what are some best practices that you've seen there?
So it varies quite a bit based on ACV and verticals and stuff. So, like, we have some companies that work with us that are sending 100 proposals a week, right? Their win rate on their proposal is like crazy low, but it's a commoditized industry and they need a proposal in front of people fast. And usually the first proposal to hit somebody's inbox is the one that wins. So in their world, presenting a proposal wouldn't make sense, because there's no way you could do 100 proposal review calls a week, right? For the majority of sales processes that sell any type of ACV that's a few $1,000s to potential 6-7 figures, those are the ones that you want to put, like, you want to do your best to try to get in front of decision makers and review it with them. Again, it's your chance to summarize your discovery, make sure you didn't miss anything. It's your chance to gauge reactions when you are proposing. So if you are reviewing a proposal, on Zoom, try to turn your camera on, right? And get them to turn their camera on, because you're going to see their reactions, especially when you hit the investment part. That's where you really want to see how they're reacting, or like do they like the price? Do they not? Um, and it also allows you to handle objections right away if you can do it.
Right.
Now, that's not always possible. A lot of us do champion selling, right? You can't get in front of the person that's going to sign for whatever reason. So when that happens, the best alternative is to do like a video recording of you going through a proposal. Use Vidyard, either send that in an email, or embed it directly in your proposals if you can, and talk to the decision maker, not to the champion.
I think there's a lot on that point, and I want to unpack a little bit of that, Dan. So when you're champion selling, like you were saying, I think in a past life, and I want to know if this is still valuable from a proposal perspective. In my past life, we used to actually sit down with our champion before we even build the proposal and have that conversation. Is that still something that's valuable in what you've seen from the research?
Yeah, it's like it's building a mutual action plan with them, right? It's like if you want to increase your chances of getting the deal done, then you need to equip your champion properly. Like we'll go as far as to try to coach our champion on how to review the proposal with their boss or their decision makers, right?
Yeah.
We'll say like, hey, like you're probably going to be asked this question, like how are you going to react? What's your answer? So if you have a true champion, they'll do that with you because they want the deal to close as much as you want to, right? So um, that's one thing to look at. But yeah, if you can't, I guess again, if you can't work with the decision makers, just use Vidyard.
Yeah, no, I think it's such an important, and I think it's an overlooked part. Like we're spending a lot of time on the mechanics of, put the signature in there. It's got 7 sections. Don't forget what we were saying at the very beginning. This is on the tail end of the closing process. Run through the finish line. Don't just send the proposal over there. Sit down. If I'm selling to Dan, let's have that convo.
It's crazy, Rich, around like how many people don't do this. Like it's like they feel like, oh, they want a proposal, I got them, and the effort just goes like phew, right? And that's like common across the board, like we were talking about earlier. It's not just the account executives that do this. It's sales ops and sales management and VPs of like, we don't need to invest here because it's like we got them once they're here.
Well, and I think there was some interesting data in here, and one of the things that I wanted to circle back, and this is again another registration question, but follow up, right? When's that? So I've sent it to you, and now I'm on pins and needles because I want my check, man. I want my quota. Like, Dan, when are you going to sign? When are you going to sign? What's the right, or what are the data show are the best practices in terms of follow up and when to follow up?
So there's a couple things that I can show here. So one thing that we notice in 2020 is deal velocity has like significantly increased. And what we mean by this is the time that it is required from like creation to sending a proposal, but also sending to open and open to one has significantly increased. Like open to one is happening 44% faster now than pre-COVID. Send to open 18% faster. And I have some stats too here that shows like how fast things are now moving when everybody's remote. So 25% of all proposals are opened within 5 minutes. So when you send it through email, you can expect that a quarter of the people will open it right away. So that is an opportunity to like monitor what you're doing. If you're using outreach or if you're using a proposal management software, you're going to get a ping saying like, hey, this is your prospect is reviewing the proposal. Cool. Pick up the phone, ask them if they have any questions, right? Handle the objections right away. 64% read it within an hour. So the bulk of your prospects, when you send a proposal, will have read it within an hour. Sorry, no, that was creating. So 15%, I'm messing up the data
No worries.
here. I have so much data. 15% will open it up within 5 minutes. 42% will open it up within 24 hours. So really that's your window of when to follow up. It's 24 hours. But here's the other thing. 16% of prospects will sign the proposal within 10 minutes of opening it, and 50% within 74 minutes of winning it. So that's where the data becomes more important, because the ones that are opening, there is half of them that should sign the deal within like pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So if you're not, like, if it's dragging beyond that, that's where you want to start setting follow-ups, right? So there's a couple things that you want to do. The close rate goes up as you're sending the next version of the proposal up to a certain point. That means there's interaction back and forth. So the overall close rate is about 40% from proposal to close. It goes up to 48% once you send the second version of the proposal, 58% once you send the third version, and then flattens at like 60% when you send version number 4 or 5, and then starts decreasing again. So you want to make sure that when you are at the proposal stage, that there is some interaction back and forth, and you're getting back to them and you are resending your proposals. And then the last little piece, I think I have it here. I was going to take. So this one here, this is a very interesting stat that is a little bit counterintuitive.
Huh.
So winning proposals are viewed 2.5 times on average. Losing proposals are viewed 3.5 times on average. So you would think when somebody looks at proposals more often, when you look at your analytics, if they keep opening up the proposal, you're like, oh, you know what? They're engaged, like there's movement there.
Right.
But really, it's if they open it up more than 3 times, you should be picking up that phone right away, because there's probably a problem and they're probably making up some assumptions around your pricing or your deliverables or something that's the reason why they keep going back to the proposal. So you want to make sure that if it does get opened up significantly, that you are picking up the phone and trying to handle objections right away.
No, I think that's a very interesting point, because I think if you had told me that stat absent with the second half of that, I'd be like, oh, they're opening it a bunch. They're really into it.
Yep.
That's a great time to follow up and reach out and sort of touch folks there. I want to bring it back to some more of the proposal best practices questions. We got a bunch of questions here live, which are great. Duncan's got a question here around something detailed, right? We're proposing something detailed like cost savings. How much detail or how much work do you show into the proposal to make sure that that's going to be an effective proposal?
Yep. It's a tricky balance. It depends on who's going to review the proposal, because for the most part, when you send it to a buyer committee, there might be one person on the buyer committee that needs the entire details and the rest don't. So if you don't know who's on that buyer committee, and if they don't need the details and you send them out, your proposal is going to look confusing and it's not going to be super compelling. So fee tables with massive calculations, all that stuff, they have their place. Usually it's somebody, like, if it needs to go to the CFO, great. Attach a secondary document, attach a Excel table, attach the calculations specifically for that person. But when it comes to the proposal itself, you want to make sure that your pricing is clear, right? You want to make sure that they know what they pay for and what they're getting for that.
Yeah, and I think that's just a back to the art of this, not just the science. As much discovery as you can on who's in that committee, because if you can pick off that CFO, hey, Dan, I want to just take 15 minutes and take you through how I came up with this cost savings. I want you to feel really comfortable with it. If you can do that, and I know it's not always possible, as Dan can attest, that's going to help a ton, making that proposal nice and simple there. So this is just a repeat. You had mentioned before the increased close rates or with proposals, including the T's and C's. Can you just restate that again for Melissa? And we're going to include these stats in the follow-up as well, folks. But can you just repeat that stat?
Yeah. So so the e-signatures, there's a couple things. The typical the typical proposal that we see that has the highest close rates is 11 pages, 7 sections. And that last section, number 7, is T's and C's and signatures. And if you add an e-signature to the proposal, because that's where people are really excited about making a purchase, is when they get that proposal. It increases, if you do the counter signature on both sides, it increases the likelihood of that deal closing by 465%.
Still, it's such a staggering number. We'll probably repeat that 5 more times throughout.
Yeah,
Everybody
it's
right
a massive number.
Everyone
It's,
right now is looking at their Word document and they're like, all right, I'm just throwing the T's and C's in there. Let's see what.
Yeah, let's have your cover page, have your exec summary, a little blurb about yourself, your pricing, your deliverables, and then throw in the T's and C's and your e-signature on there, because it does help. And add an image.
Yeah, so this is actually a good question too, coming in from Brandon. Any thoughts on mixing different types of things into that proposal doc, right? Where we've got, indemnification or data privacy information with action plans and value props and pricing calculators. Like, how do we make sure that all hangs together? Are there any issues mixing some of those things being maybe even construed as a binding statement versus just a statement of this is what the state of the world is?
So, like, I would have a section specific for all of these T's and C's, right? Like we have them on our proposals basically look like the first 4 or 5 sections are like the summary of our discovery, and then it's an order form and T's and C's and deliverables. So we have all of those there. Like we have our data policy, our privacy policy, our T's and C's. It's all there. It's all linked. Like we're a SaaS company, and you can self-serve on our website if you're a smaller plan. So we have them there, and it's on our website. Anybody can access them, and that's really what we put on there. We have a couple additional T's and C's that we will put in sales, as long as it's like, again, it's like you kind of want to separate of like here's what I'm proposing, and then here's the order form, and it's a very clear of like, here's what the proposal is, and then essentially you're just tacking on your contract at the end. I think it's okay to put all of these things in one document.
And some of it may make sense, like what we were saying before. It may make sense for it to be an addendum too, right? Like for the general data privacy in Europe, right? The data processor agreement's like 4 pages. That can be that in some instances, right, may make sense for it to be an addendum, especially if your buying committee aren't necessarily super concerned with that, as an example.
Yeah.
So we've got Dan here for about another 5 minutes. I've certainly got a few more questions for him, but for folks that are joining us here live, please do put those questions in the Q&A panel. We'll get through just as many as we can here. Dan, one thing that I wanted to make sure that we kind of got to here, we didn't actually dive into this data we've been talking about, like it was super factual. How many proposals did Proposify actually analyze to get to this, just to give folks in the audience a sense that this isn't like a couple?
Yeah, no, we looked at our total database of 2.6 million proposals. So it's a lot of data. It's not anecdotal at this point.
No, and I mean, I think this is what, the 2nd or 3rd year that Proposify has done this too.
Yeah.
So we've got some of those comparative notes here. Another question coming in. So you mentioned before, there's a self-service component with Proposify, right? I can go in and transact on the website. There's also a more deeper engagement here. Do you have an example of somebody that's actually like using a payment portal to sign up and pay, but maybe where there is some contracting? This is Susan's question to the Q&A panel, where there is some contracting, or proposal document that's actually being put out there.
Yeah, like that's how we do it on our sales team, because we have both a self-serve model for smaller plans, but we also have a sales team that are selling, 10 plus seats to our customers. So we've done it that way, where it's like we'll sign them up for the account. We have a payment portal, all of that stuff, but we want to have a signed contract for those annual agreements, and that's where we use the proposal. So we basically created an order form, and then the next step is like, here's a link to the reps Chili Piper to set up your account activation. We do set them up with the account, do the payment portal, that kind of stuff. But for us, we wanted to have a signed document that was a contract. The other reason is that we also sell professional services as part of our deals. So that's another piece that we needed to combine, not just the software and the user count or user costs, but also add in the professional services on that.
I think this is interesting, and I think this is something too. As we share this information afterwards, we'll include some reference materials on this as well. Great question there. Another question coming in. Yeah, this is from Brian. Brian, yeah, we'll share a copy of the slides and the recording with folks, and the proposal, the state of sales proposals afterwards as well. I'm going to ask this question and paraphrase kind of both of these. Any tips or tricks for enacting change in your organization? Hey, Dan, we've been using DocuSign. It's fine. Any recommendations on how to folks can affect change like this other than using this data?
Like it's one of these things, like it's hard. Any type of change is hard, right? So you have the biggest compelling reason to enact change on this type of process. It really comes down to how do people buy in general now. And if you think about it in that way, and you think about the instant access to information, the ease of use of websites and apps and that kind of stuff, that's where you can look at your sales process and look whether or not there's opportunities to make some changes. You usually need some sort of executive buy-in, right? So it's getting that validation from the executives that this is an important thing and we need to fix this. That's where change will happen. Anybody can surface that up to the executives, but again, it comes back down to like, how do people buy now? So you might not have a problem right now, but if 3 of your competitors have moved away from sending a Word doc and they are using methods that are easier for a customer to buy now, eventually you will start seeing that stuff. So that's one piece. The other piece is if you are scaling up fast, it's incredibly difficult to scale up when you're using Word documents for some of the reasons why, like I mentioned earlier on, around like you can have a template in your Google Drive. It's all good, but I know, and I've been in these organizations, I've done this myself. You hit download and then you never go and download it again. And you just copy paste from other documents and other proposals and other decks until you have a mishmash of everything put together. And it doesn't matter that marketing is going to your Google Drive and updating your slides or updating your proposal, or legal did it, or finance did it, or whoever. It really doesn't matter, because the rep doesn't go and log in again, and they don't re-download, and they don't delete their old templates. So there's that aspect of it as well, of like, you just eventually you're just going to have bad contracts if you don't have a way to wrap something around it.
I think that's great advice, and that's I think that's probably the strongest one to wrap on here, Dan. This was awesome. We've never had content like this. We've never had a speaker like you, Daniel, here in front of the MSP community. On behalf of the entire MSP team behind the scenes, all the folks who joined us here live, everybody in the community watching this on YouTube afterwards. I know you're incredibly busy, Daniel, and I want to thank you so much for sharing this. This was really awesome and a hell of a lot of fun.
It was an awesome conversation.
Yeah.
Thanks for moderating this, Rich.
And we look forward to having you on again. Once again, this is Daniel Hebert from Proposify. Really grateful for him sharing some time with us today. For everybody online, please stay safe, and we'll share the recording with you afterwards, in addition to the state of sales proposal. So everyone will get a chance to download that as well. And with that, Daniel, stay safe, have a wonderful rest of your day, and we'll see you soon. Take care, everybody.
See ya.